When you can't fight anymore, let God take over. Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in life when you reach your limit. When you fought every battle, tried every solution, and pushed with everything inside you, yet nothing changes. You're exhausted, drained, and out of answers. And in that moment, the world tells you to fight harder, to push further, to keep forcing your way through. But what if that's not the answer? What if the real strength isn't in fighting, but in surrendering? See, we think surrender means defeat. We think stepping aside means we've lost. But that's not the truth. There are battles in life that aren't meant for us to fight alone. There are struggles we weren't designed to carry on our own. And when you've done all you can, when you've reached your breaking point, that's when it's time to let go. That's when it's time to step aside and let something greater take over. Because when you can't fight anymore, that's when real faith begins. Life will break you down. That's a guarantee. You'll hit points where no matter how strong you think you are, no matter how much you push, you can't seem to move forward. That's when the weight of the world presses against your chest, stealing your breath, shaking your confidence. And right there, in that moment, is where faith is tested. Not when everything is going well, not when the road is clear, but when the storm is raging and you can't see a way out. See, we love to talk about strength. We love to talk about endurance. We love to tell ourselves that if we just fight a little harder, if we just grind a little longer, we'll get through it. But what happens when you've given all you have? What happens when the battle in front of you is bigger than you, stronger than you, and no matter how much you swing, you can't land a hit? That's when real faith begins. Because faith isn't just about believing when things are easy. It's not about trusting when the road is straight. Faith is built in the fire. It's built when you're on your knees, when your strength is gone, when your mind is exhausted and your spirit is drained. That's when you find out what you really believe. That's when you learn that faith is not about standing tall, it's about standing at all. Too often, we rely on ourselves. We put the pressure on our own shoulders. We convince ourselves that we have to fix everything, control everything, fight everything on our own. And when we can't, we feel like failures. We feel weak, we feel lost. But what if I told you that's the exact moment you're supposed to let go? What if I told you that your lowest point is not a sign of defeat, but a setup for something greater? Because here's the truth. Sometimes you're not supposed to fight. Sometimes you're supposed to surrender. And I don't mean surrender in weakness. I don't mean surrender in defeat. I mean surrender in trust. Surrender in faith. Surrender to something bigger than you, something stronger than you, something that has already mapped out the way when you can't. We think we have to know every answer. We think we have to have the blueprint, the plan, the strategy. But what if the path isn't something you create? What if it's something you follow? What if the breakthrough you've been fighting for isn't on the other side of struggle, but on the other side of trust? Because when you're at your weakest, that's when faith is strongest. That's when you stop relying on your own limited power and start tapping into something greater. That's when you realize you were never meant to carry the whole load, never meant to fight every battle on your own, never meant to push yourself beyond the breaking point just to prove something. Because faith isn't about proving, it's about believing. You might be in that place right now. You might be tired. You might be worn out. You might be at the edge thinking there's nothing left in you to give. And I'm here to tell you that's exactly where you need to be. Because when you finally run out of your own strength, that's when the real strength shows up. That's when you stop relying on your own hands and start trusting the hands that never fail. That's when you stop trying to figure it all out and start walking in faith step by step, even when you can't see the road ahead. You see, faith is not about having all the answers. It's about walking forward even when you don't. It's about trusting that when you can't, something greater can. It's about knowing that the battles you face, the struggles you carry, the weight that's pressing down on you, it's not all up to you to handle because there's a power greater than you. A power that sees what you don't, that knows what you can't, that moves when you're stuck. And the moment you stop fighting in your own strength, the moment you stop forcing it all on yourself, that's the moment when faith takes over. There's a difference between giving up and stepping aside. People confuse the two all the time. They think if they stop pushing, if they stop forcing, they've lost. They think surrender means failure. But surrender isn't about quitting. It's about recognizing that not every battle is yours to fight. It's about understanding that sometimes the greatest act of strength is stepping aside and letting something greater take over. We're taught to be warriors. We're told to push through, to never back down, to keep fighting no matter what. And that mindset has its place. But what happens when the battle is bigger than you? What happens when no matter how hard you swing, no matter how strong you stand, nothing changes? That's when you have a choice. You can keep exhausting yourself, keep pushing against something that won't move, or you can step aside and let a power greater than you take control. Because there are some fights that aren't meant for you, some battles that require a force beyond your own. And as long as you keep holding on, as long as you keep trying to manage it all on your own, you're blocking what's meant to step in. You're standing in the way of the very breakthrough you've been praying for. Because faith is not about how much you can carry, it's about knowing when to let go. Think about it. How many times have you tried to fix something that just wouldn't change? How many times have you lost sleep over problems you couldn't solve? How many times have you run yourself into the ground trying to hold everything together, afraid that if you let go, everything would fall apart? But what if letting go is exactly what you need to do? What if your hands are too full to receive the blessing that's waiting for you? See, we think surrender is weakness because we live in a world that tells us control is everything. We want to be the ones calling the shots. We want to be the ones who make it happen. But control is an illusion. No matter how much you try, no matter how hard you fight, there will always be things that are beyond your ability to change. And that's where faith begins. That's where you realize it was never about your strength to begin with. You've seen people who carry too much, people who refuse to let go, people who hold on so tightly to their pain, their past, their struggles that they never move forward. That's what happens when you don't step aside. That's what happens when you refuse to trust in something greater than yourself. You end up lost in a battle you were never meant to fight alone. But when you surrender, everything changes. When you step aside, you make room for something bigger. You shift from trying to force your way through to allowing the path to open before you. You go from fighting in frustration to moving in peace because there is a power beyond you, a power that sees the road ahead, a power that knows exactly where you need to be and how to get you there. But it can't take over until you step aside. You can't walk in faith and still try to control everything. You can't say you believe in something greater while refusing to let go. Faith isn't just words, it's action. It's the decision to stop carrying what isn't yours to carry. It's the choice to step back and trust that even when you don't understand, even when you can't see the outcome, there is something working in your favor. Look back at your life. Look at the times when you fought and fought, but nothing changed. And now look at the moments when you finally let go, when you finally stepped aside. That's when the breakthrough happened. That's when doors opened. That's when what you had been striving for finally came together. Not because you forced it, but because you released it. Because surrender isn't the end of the fight, it's the beginning of something greater. So now you have a choice. You can keep carrying it all, keep pushing, keep exhausting yourself trying to control what was never yours to control. Or you can step aside. You can release the weight, let go of the battle, and trust that something greater is already working on your behalf. Because the moment you surrender is the moment things start to shift. The moment you stop forcing is the moment the right doors begin to open. And the moment you step aside is the moment you realize you were never alone in this fight to begin with.